Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Solidarity Live. We're here this morning with Melissa Byrne, activist and progressive strategist, former Bernie campaign staffer. Good morning, Melissa. How are you doing?
Hey, good morning, Jocelyn. I wish we were back hanging out at rallies together.
I frequently wish that as well.
I'll never forget running into you at the first LA rally in March of 19. And then you were needing something for the live stream.
Oh my goodness. I miss those California rallies. I think they were some of the, I don't know. Actually, this is totally not related to canceling student debt, but favorite Bernie rally, go.
My favorite Bernie rally was at 5 a.m, the morning after we won, we virtually tied the Iowa caucus because he flew into New Hampshire and landed at 4 a.m. and we did a 5 a.m. pass the baton rally.
Oh, I love that.
But the LA rally we met at, was actually connected to student debt because that's the first time he talked about eliminating student loan debt.
Really? That is interesting. Yeah. Okay. So this has been, for those who don't know, you are the activist around this issue. Could you tell people a little bit about your origin story with the activism and the organizing you've done around this issue and the issue itself, if you're comfortable?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, it ties back to Alex Lawson because all things tie back to Alex, even though he's not here today. Sure.
We'll come back, I promise.
So it starts with me having a lot of student loan debt and, all of the struggles that come with that. But 10, 11 years ago, people didn't really talk about it. And I was working for Social Security Works. And I was asked to go to a meeting before work with the executive director at the AFL because it was like one of these like morning before work meetings where different groups get together and have conversations because you're not on the clock yet. And I went, and this guy was the featured speaker, and he asked people around the table to raise their hand if they had student loan debt. And I was the youngest at the time, so I raised my hand, and I'm the only one that had student loan debt. And then he goes, "Well, how much debt do you have?" And I said, "I'm not telling." I'm like, why would I talk about how much student loan debt I have, especially in front of like all of these executive directors of organizations? Like, what's going on? And then without skipping a beat, this guy goes, "Well, as long as you're ashamed of your student loan debt, the banks have all the power." And I just like stopped in my tracks because it was the first time someone said that it's not a me failure, it's a structural problem. And then he asked again how much student loan debt I had. And I said half the amount because like let's be real, like shame, it's not like something that magically happens.
Yeah.
And so this guy who did this was you might have heard of him, the Reverend Jesse Jackson.
Yes, I have heard that name once or twice.
He's a good organizer. He really knows how to call and like get you to connect. So let's talk about, so generations of organizing keeps going. So there's that. And so I left that meeting with the determination that one, I wanted to make college free and that I wanted to get rid of student loan debt. So that meeting, I think it was August of 2010.
Wow.
Here we are now. And so 10 years after that, canceling student loan debt was in the presidential platform. And here now we're at the point where we're close to being able to win on this. And obviously, like if you would have asked me like in 2010 if it would take this long, I would have been like, I'm not gonna do that. Like he wants like an 11-year long project. So like, but yeah, so it was like one of those things where like it's not something that like, a millionaire is gonna write like some sort of like $40 million check and have a campaign to really work on this. So as I was slowly working on it and talking about it and doing it on the side of other projects and, tying it actually tied in a lot to work around Social Security policy and because you can actually have Social Security benefits garnished for defaulted federal student loan debt. This guy decided to run for president, and I was wrapping up another campaign when I got this email, like the mass emails, and like my friends were actually working at the firm that was writing them. So I'm like, there should be no magic behind it because I know how the sausage is made. They're like, my friends are the ones that make it. But an email was sent and it asked you to tell your student loan debt story and to reply. And so that was March 14th, I think, of 2015. And I was like, oh my gosh, I replied. And then in that instance, I knew that the fastest way to cancel student loan debt and make college free was for Senator Bernard Sanders to do really well in his presidential race, because we would have more exposure, more excitement, more of everything. And so that's why I joined up the campaign. And then the first go around, it was focused on the free college. And the second go around, I just knew he would come on board to cancel student loan debt. And in June of 2019, he launched the Cancel All Student Loan Debt platform, leading the pack. And now we're good.
Oh my goodness. I'm so glad I asked that question, Melissa, because I don't think I've ever heard it. So full disclosure, Melissa and I are friends. We see each other on all sorts of, Bernie things, Capitol Hill things, activism things. So but
Facebook.
oh my God. To my Facebook friends, I apologize. but like, it's really exciting to hear it, how one person, because I love that you bring up it's not just about student debt. It's about the way we view students, individuals, the elderly as profit centers in this country. And it's fundamentally disgusting to me, especially with student debt, because who doesn't want a population that's more educated and skilled?
Yep. And it's about dignity. And it's the idea, like for me, what I try to explain to people, and I keep harping on this, is that both tuition and student loan debt are basically class mobility taxes.
Yes.
So if you're born wealthy, you have free tuition because your parents pay for it and you don't have a tax on that gift. So rich kids are born with free college. So they don't have to pay personally a class mobility tax to be able to go to college and get the education that you need for your professional life. And they're not told growing up that you can't afford college, that college is what other people do. And by college, I just want to make sure that it's clear that it's like a shorthand for trade school or community college or 4-year, because it's not about getting everybody like, professional degrees. It's that if you need the trade degree, if you need the certification to have the certificate to draw blood and work in a hospital doing that really essential work, this is all education, and that's all post high school education programs. And so when you mean college, it really means post high school education, just that's a lot more words to say. So I just want to be really clear about that. And so a big part of this is that as long as you do the work to get into the program that will make you be able to go on the path that you deserve, then you have that. You don't have barriers standing in the way, because we shouldn't have a society where only the wealthy kids have a chance to be able to live up to their potential.
And that's essentially what we do have. I mean, so we've talked a little bit in the pre-show about how Biden has come on board with, he's excited about canceling up to $10,000 in student debt, but that is an insultingly low number when the average student, so the average, this isn't even the high number, has $60,000 in student debt right now.
Yep. I mean, and I think that's part of the challenge, is that everybody that was working on student loan debt during the primary was either on the Biden campaign or the Warren campaign. Mm-hmm. So the Biden campaign was a bit rushed in terms of pulling together their canceling student loan program as a way to, help, create some unity. And the sad day that the Bernie campaign ended. I'm still a little sad about that, but it's cool. So his program, he has a couple of different plans, and it's not one cohesive narrative. So the 10K number is tied into his COVID relief plan. So that's basically an across the board with COVID plan. I don't support that, and I'll explain why. His other part is canceling all federal student loan debt, people who went to public colleges, and I don't support that either. But the thing is, for me, like, I see these things as basically agreeing to the concept that the student loan debt needs to go, and now we're just negotiating over details. And I trust the advocates' ability to negotiate, because justice is on our side. And so it's more of being able to really go into this with good faith and really pushing them, so that way they do the best that they can on this. Because yes, it's going to help 44 million people with student loan debt, but it's also going to help them get reelected. It's going to help Democrats expand majorities during the midterms, because people need this. There's a reason. So last year on March 13th, because of the CARES Act, student loan debt was paused for 6 months. So if you had a federal student loan, you were paused on having to pay. Your interest rate was dropped to 0. And I knew as soon as it went to September 30th that it would be extended, because no one would want your first student loan payments to be coming as your ballots are arriving in your mailbox.
That's a
And,
good point.
and then through executive action, Trump and DeVos extended it through the end of December. And then it got extended for a month. And then the first thing that Joe Biden did as president, when he sat at his desk in the Oval Office and started signing the day one executive orders, was he extended it through September 30th of this year.
And do you know, it's I love that he did that. That was one of the early executive orders. Which is, yay! But I love what you're saying in general, though. You're right. I should be more positive, because the fact that this is happening at all is absolutely a comment on the incredible work that you have done, and that a lot of other organizers and advocates have done to make this a central issue. You know, I still talk to people who are confused about how primary this issue is to so many students, more and more and more, especially an older generation that didn't pay as much for school, I think.
Yeah, but no, it's an everybody issue. It's a racial justice issue. Black women end up having to pay a lot more on student loan debt than other people. It's an issue of, you know, say, even if you do grow up wealthy and then for whatever reason your parents don't like you when you hit 18, and then you don't, because of their income, you don't qualify for aid, and then you just take out debt.
I have a lot of thoughts and feelings about that one, because that exists. It's more common than people realize, which I'm not trying to diminish the class privilege of growing up wealthy, regardless of how your parents treat you. But it's that the way we organize this policy assumes that people don't have abusive or financially withholding parents, which tons of people do, especially among the rich, who are not particularly good people.
No, I mean, I definitely know people who are in the LGBT community who their parents didn't agree with that and they're cut off.
Mm-hmm.
So this issue really impacts people. And then, you know, if you think about it, like, say, if you manage to make it through undergrad with minimal debt, but then you want to be a first generation college student, you want to become a lawyer and do public interest law, or you want to be a doctor or a dentist, you end up with a lot of debt. And the thing is, like, we want people going into medical fields. We want people who from low income backgrounds becoming dentists, because you're more likely to then, you know, do more general dentistry and help people out. But like, if you're a dentist and you have 500 grand of debt, you're not going to be able to take on low income patients and like cut your margin, you know, like you need to basically pay back all that debt. So it ties into like all of the issues, which is why I think the cleanest thing to do right now is just to cancel all the federal student loan debt. And you'll see people from the Brookings and the Chicago Booth School and Third Way, they all start whining and they start like getting into hysterics, like, but a rich person might get their student loan debt canceled. And I'm like, no, because that person, when they originated that debt, they weren't rich. And you're not telling the rich kid that becomes a doctor that they need to pay a mobility tax on the education they got free from their parents. So like, why should this low income person that became a doctor, why should they have to give up 300-400 grand of their wages?
I love that you bring that up, because it is so funny to me that the people who are all about, you know, we mustn't hurt the rich people's feelings, the minute it involves also helping poor people, which this would, all of a sudden it's like, oh, but that's not fair. What?
Well, and meanwhile, they're the ones that are against like raising taxes on the wealthy. So
yes.
It's about punishing people. So much of our economic policy is about punishing people to be able to like preserve a strict class system. Because if everybody has the opportunity to succeed, like, it means their kids will have more people to compete with.
I love that you bring that up. Damn, sorry, I'm writing that down because it's so insightful. We do have an economic system which is premised on punishing people, and it's shame-based, and it's also fundamentally illogical, because we're living in the middle of a pandemic. I don't know about you. I want as many smart, brilliant scientific minds on all of these problems as possible. And not just the obvious ones like the vaccine, but the less obvious ones. Like, you and I have discussed a lot what it's like to being single in this pandemic, the mental health issues that are ballooning around this pandemic, and mental health professions are a perfect example where this comes into play, because to be a therapist, you have to take out all this debt to get a master's degree, and then you're going to make what, 40 or 50K?
Or like think about the climate. Like, do we want people that go on to graduate school like design programs or law programs or science programs? Do we want them going to big law? Do we want them going to like
Yeah.
an engineering firm, or do we want them to be able to, because they're not paying $1,000 a month in student loan debt for 20 years, they can then take maybe a slightly lower paying job doing great climate work.
Absolutely. And it's really interesting too. You know, I know a lot of people, DC is filled with this type of person who they were working class or maybe lower middle class, but then because they had to go into so much debt, their class allegiance changes subtly over time because it's like you're saying, if you're a working class person and then you go $300,000 in debt, which is people do this to go to law school or medical school, and then you're working for big pharma or a top law firm, of course your politics are going to change. Versus if that person didn't have that burden, you're absolutely correct, Melissa, they probably would choose something else to do with their lives.
Yeah. And I just think that like you shouldn't have that. I think that you can't like, and I just really think about like I start thinking kindergarten, because if you know that like higher education is based on like family wealth, you're reinforced from kindergarten that, oh, college is what other people do. Or you have to win a scholarship, or you have to take out debt. You're just basically told, so like it inhibits education all the way up.
And I think we're both interested. I think anyone with a basic amount of self-interest wants a country where everybody has their genius actualized, whatever that looks like for them, whether that's facing the issues we have as the climate or, again, mental health, medical health. Like, I think one of the things that makes me saddest about late stage capitalism is I really do believe every single person out there has incredible potential, unlimited potential, really. And what we're doing is shaming people out of giving their potential to the things that would make this a better world for everybody.
And it hurts in generations. I mean, then you have parents that feel bad that they can't write a check for their kids' college. So it creates generational pain. And then you also have parents that are taking out plus loans. So you have people in their 50s and their 60s that are taking out like 200 grand in debt to be able to pay for their kids' college. So then they're stuck. And so that's the other part, is that student loan debt. It's not an issue that people think of like the 18-year-old at a party at a college. And like, you're like, oh, how much sympathy do you have for like an 18-year-old going into debt while they're going to like some sort of like frat party or whatever? But it's like a family issue. It like up and down, every age cohort has student loan debt. Every age cohort is impacted by it. So when you cancel this loan debt, you're going to help out all the age cohorts. So you're going to see an uptick in people buying homes, starting businesses, people being like parents, being able to retire with dignity. You're going to be able to see folks in their 30s and 40s, instead of like putting stuff away for the next 10, 15 years towards their student loan debt, they can put it in retirement savings. Because if we don't do this, this is going to like crash head on into like a retirement crisis.
A retirement crisis? But I mean, I think you and I have both strongly considered, like, can we afford to have kids in this economy when like student loan debt is at an all-time high, housing costs are cost prohibitive? Like, I'm so tired of these think pieces that are like, but why aren't young people having children? Like, are you serious?
It's all the avocado toast. Actually, no, it's the student loan debt, not the avocado toast.
Yes, exactly. The student loan debt, which makes buying a house harder, which makes, and wages are stagnated. All of this ties together, and it's like, but why are young people commitment phobic? What could it be?
I mean, like, you can't like say if you're, because of your student loan debt, you're not saving. So if you end up with like a bad boss in a really bad toxic work environment, you can't just quit because you don't have the savings to, it just basically, it hits you like in all these different parts of like choice points, and you're basically taking away people's free choice.
Well, Melissa, so I mean, I'm really inspired by you in a lot of ways, but like this shame thing, how did you overcome this to become the person you are now? Because I think that is something we need in every form of organizing.
I mean, I think it's definitely slow. I think once you start talking about it and it's like kind of like in a whisper, And like, you know, I would be at like happy hours, like, no, we can really cancel student loan debt. We can really make college free. And when you start talking to people one-on-one about it and you see like the light in their eyes go off, like, oh, we can actually change this, that just gets there. And then the more that you talk about it, the more that I was like literally bugging everybody about it. And then it helped that the issue just started taking off. And then we're there making videos, and my mom keeps walking by. She says
Does she
hi.
want to come on?
No, she does not want to come on. So if you're walking in the background, she says sorry. This is pandemic life.
So true, so real.
So yeah, it's really just, and that is just more talking about it, and the more like it kind of like became my brand in a way. But the upside of that, it just means when like I walk into a room, like say if I'm doing things at the DNC, you're doing things like they know when I show up, it's like, we can talk about student loan debt. I'm like, I'm here. I'm helping out right now because this is the way that we're going to cancel student loan debt.
And I think that's important. It's important. I mean, you know, I think one of the issues we have on the left, and I'm definitely guilty of this, is we tend to be more intellectual people. Like we like to talk about like, how does it all fit together? But I think what you do really well as an activist, you're like, so cancel student loan debt? Cancel student loan debt?
I call it the broken record theory of organizing.
But it's effective and it's necessary, because I think, sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh, I was going to say, part of it also knows that like this is my top issue and I fight on this, but I also, if you do it this way, you still have to show up for everybody else. So that means like you show up with the undocumented people that are fighting for their dignity. You show up for healthcare, that even if you're you might have a single issue focus, but you still show up for everybody else's fights.
Because I think when, you know, we could talk about this all day. Every single one of these issues that we're mobilizing for ties into all the other ones. Yeah. I mean, you're bringing up 7, 10 different things I didn't even think about with this one issue, because you're right. So the plus loans, could you expand a little bit on that? Because I did not know about this, but it makes sense.
So plus loans are loans that are called the parent loans for undergraduate school. And they are loans that parents and grandparents can take out on behalf of their kids to go to school.
Mm-hmm.
They're like the inverse of this other program that if you even talk about touching it, people in DC have the vapors and they pass out, called the 529s. So rich families, they get to not only send their kids to college for free, they get a tax benefit for doing so. So, right. And the CBO has shown that the people that take advantage the most of the 529 program are people from like the most affluent tax brackets. So you people that will save the whole cost of undergraduate and graduate school like in these tax shelters where they're getting a tax benefit for using them, and then the kids get to use them tax free. So that's what the rich people get for college. They get a tax incentive to save for their kids' college. And yes, anybody can use them, but let's be real, if you're making $8 an hour, you don't have cash to put aside for your kids' college. Even if you're making 50 or 60 grand a year, like maybe you can save 20 grand over the course of 18 years. But the people who can't save for their kids' college, and they have a decent enough credit, they can take out plus loans. So then they're stuck paying back a ton of money for their kids' school when, you know, college should just be free. And that way the people that are, and then have like a minimum loan. So like say if your base things are free and your parents can only chip in for like half of your living expenses, have a 0 interest rate loan to help with some of that housing and things like that. So I think like we can do a lot of stuff to fix it. And we're very lucky, like, you know, Dr. Jill Biden, the first lady, she's a huge advocate of community college. So we have her in the White House championing community college. And nothing's going to get in her way of getting everything that community colleges need. And then other folks are going to be fighting really hard for the 4 years to be free, for the trade schools. There's some debate over means testing. This is what, again, the people that have feelings do, is that they start whining about the idea that a rich kid might get free college. But what they're missing out when they start, all like, oh, should Ivanka have free college? And what
sure.
Yeah, she should totally get. Is that Ivanka went to an Ivy League college, which gets their Ivy League college, private universities are nonprofits, so they have a tax shelter. They get federal grant money for programs. They get state money. So the tax subsidy on a student at an Ivy League school ends up being more than if you were to just have the state pay their tuition at a public school. But no one's saying that, that you should have that the rich kids should have to, pay a premium on top of the tuition. So these are all like disingenuous facts. I'm still really, really mad. I'm not going to name him, of the presidential candidate that in the Iowa caucus over Thanksgiving in 2019 that did an attack ad against free college. It's not that I remember every single moment of that day.
Wait,
And
how was this? Now I want to know. You can't just
can't say it's part of moving forward, but he knows. He knows. It's not the current president, by the way, somebody else.
Nice.
So, but that's the thing, is I have to contend with these disingenuous people. Like one of the researchers who writes on this a lot is Sandy Baum. And it's just like, why? Like you just like, you're putting up all these roadblocks. And I think a lot of times people want to sound smart. So the more complicated a program is, the more they can pat themselves on their back and be like, look how smart I am. I've designed this program that's 30 pages long with like 5 million caveats and carve outs. Aren't I intelligent? When really it's like, no, we need to end defunding higher education. We need to fully fund the public schools. We need to have undergraduate tuition be free. We need to make sure schools are funded enough so that way graduate programs are not being used to subsidize the entire schools. And we can just make it so we're able to have people get the education that they need to be able to succeed.
Well, and there's another element to this. So, I have so many people in my family I dislike at a moral and political level. And I think about their voice in my head whenever I'm thinking through these issues. And they would always be like, well, why should I pay for someone to get a degree in English with my tax dollars? It's like, okay, fine. You don't want to do that? Make more professions that are available for entry level professionals without college. And that's the flip side of this issue. I think, along with the student debt and the wage stagnation, you point this out all the time. If you need an English degree to get a job at, like, I don't know, an insurance company where you're going to make $30K afterwards, then you need to stop shaming people for getting that English degree.
And we also just need to talk about it, like what college does is it actually takes pressure off the labor market.
Yes.
All these folks that are getting an education, those are people that aren't doing full-time work. So that enables other people to have full-time work in that place. It's also why we need to make sure people can retire. So retiring with dignity also helps the labor market. So you want to make sure people can exit the labor market, when they're 60, 62. So that way they can have the dignity that they need and like not be forced to. Obviously people should retire like when it's right for them, like none of this like forcing people out, but like having like an easy in and an easy out with dignity. And I think a lot of times people will say, well, let's give we need more trades programs. And yes, we need more trades programs, but a lot of what's in that is the rich kids aren't going to trades programs. No one's going up to
Yes.
the kids in Fairfax County that go to the richest private schools in the DC area and telling them that they shouldn't go to Harvard and that they should really just do a trades program. They say a trades program as a way to be able to hint and not say it directly, that they think that poor kids should be tracked on this one program.
Can we make a video? Can we go door to door in the wealthiest suburbs in Fairfax and be like, which plumbing program are you looking at for your children?
When people say, well, we need more I guess we need more trades programs, but that should be for the people that want to go into trades programs.
Of course.
And they should be supported at every step of the way in doing that. But it should never be used as shorthand for saying that poor kids deserve less.
Because that's what it is. And I mean, I want to be clear. I think we should destigmatize every form of work because every form of labor is valuable. There is no unskilled profession. I mean, the hardest job I've ever had was waiting tables, and it's also where I was paid the worst and treated the worst. So it's like, yes, obviously, but and it's funny because another thing I say about waiting tables is I was very happy doing it. The thing I didn't like was the sexual assault and the wages and the lack of basic worker protections. Every single job out there has dignity if you pay people and protect them. Yeah. But oh, sorry, I interrupted you.
But it shouldn't be that if you're born poor, you have less options.
Exactly. And it's so funny because when you do you face resistance from people that you would think would be allies on this issue?
Not as much now, but
Okay.
definitely like 10 years ago when I first started talking about it, it was a lot of like, patting on your head and being like, oh, that's cute, or oh, this is ridiculous. Why are you talking about that? Or this will never happen. And so it's been really great to see that change over the years. And now that we're getting close to getting a win, it's going to be different kinds of resistance because it's going to be a lot of like defining like what is a win. So you have like Schumer and Warren saying 50K is good.
Mm-hmm.
You have other people saying, you have me saying like, no, 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 we want to cancel all the federal student loan debt. And then we need to ensure like through executive action. And then we need to ensure that we do a legislative cleanup with the FFEL loans and the federal Pell loans that are held by universities and the private loans. It's a multi-step. And so I just think that it's really important that we just get it done. But now like it's no longer if people support the concept, it's talking about the details of the concept and getting us there. But also, we're in the middle of COVID. We are in the middle of an immigration crisis where you have like babies sleeping outside in tents at the border right now. So part of it is also understanding that this fits into a much bigger crisis scenario.
Sure.
And we need to get a lot done. And that I am confident that we have the support and the energy and the administration to get this done if we don't give up and if we navigate it in the right way.
Well, and that brings me to my other question. So, you are a very prolific activist. Could you talk a little bit about some of the actions you've done with COVID over the past year?
Yes. So I was wrapping up. It was actually my first time really thinking a lot. Well, I was in California last year doing work I was on one of the leads for California for the Bernie campaign. And that's where some of the first COVID cases were. And so I remember had a big rally with Public Enemy and Dick Van Dyke. And this was on March 1st of 2020. And even planning on that, we were like, can we still go through with it? Like this COVID thing is happening. Like how serious is it? Talking to the public health department, getting advice. And we were clear to go through with it. And then a week later, I flew into New York City for the campaign because we all got transferred over to New York after we won California. And then 4 days later, we were work from home. And then 4 weeks after that, he suspended. And then I was just like, I got to keep organizing. And so I connected with people that were doing work around COVID. And so the first thing that I did after the campaign was I hopped down to DC for the day. And it was very interesting, like in the height of the pandemic, to hop on a train. I think I had like 10 face masks on and many layers of gloves and was like bathing myself in hand sanitizer. We did a car caravan around the White House with cars decorated for Trump to stop lying, like Trump lies, people die around COVID. And then we dropped off all these body bags at the Trump hotel. And the image is still being used. I saw like 2 days ago, there was a Guardian article about COVID, and that image was still being used. So, and then we did an action around COVID about a month later where we dropped coffins this time in Lafayette Park at the White House. So we did a couple of things around that. And then we started through my work with advising the DNC, we did light brigades all across the country where
very pretty.
Starting in DC, where the night that Trump accepted his nomination as president, he did a big fireworks show. So this is August 25th of 2020. And that's, as I think at that point, we were at 180,000 dead from COVID. And so I had this idea that as the fireworks were going off, to juxtapose the fireworks with the amount of people that had died from COVID. So we did a light brigade exercise where we had Trump lied, 180,000 died, spelled out on, I think it was 15th Street. And so and we were able to get the pictures right as the fireworks were going off. And a reporter got some video of it, so it ended up on CNN. So we started basically using that. So wherever Trump went between August 25th and the election day were different either light brights, billboard trucks. We had a floating billboard in Miami, or in both in English, Spanish, and Haitian Creole. We spelled out Trump lied and whatever the count was. So every time we went to create the art, we had to check in with Johns Hopkins numbers to make sure the count was right. And so it made me incredibly aware throughout the fall of just this like escalating death count and this knowledge that it's only happening because we had a president who didn't care.
Yeah. Yeah. And all of those actions were stunning and incredibly moving. And, it's funny because I think a lot of people underestimate how important this form of art / activism is. You're right. Like these images were used all over the world.
Yep, my friend that lives in Sydney, Australia, messaged me to be like, I just saw your work on our local news. I'm like, that's weird. Like, you're seeing my work. And it's obviously it's not just my work. I work with a bunch of great artists, and everything one person does is only a result of having a great community of people that are working on it. The same with student debt work. You have the Debt Collective, you have Americans for Financial Reform, Student Debt Crisis. You have really great theorists working on it, academics. It's like a whole community. You have electeds that are being brave, like Ayanna Pressley, Ilhan Omar, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who we all love. You have Richie Torres is all over canceling student loan debt. It's like great, like Jamal Bowman, Mondari. I just can't I used to before it'd be like, who's gonna cancel student loan debt? Maybe Keith Ellison will be into it, or maybe And it was just like, can you do it? And now it's just like, I can't keep track of, I would need to list it on a Google Doc to be able to name everybody.
Which is incredible. And, it's so funny because I think when I was really young, like high school, I, like a true nerdy leftist, I was like, it's all about knowing all these facts and then aligning them in the right way. But what you're bringing up, I think, is that these fights are cultural battles. They used art, they use psychology, they use community, they of course use politics and elected officials. But the things we believe in, it's not a linear push. It's about a bunch of people coming together.
Yeah, and it's about getting it to the right time. Like I remember in 15, I was actually close to starting an organization on student loan debt at the time.
Really?
And yeah, I was really close to getting one started. And then I just realized I would never get enough funding to actually be able to make a dent. And for me, I also thought that it's like bad to take people's money if you can't actually win. Because I think sometimes in this space, like you'll work on an issue, but it just becomes like your job. And so there's that, it becomes complicated. So like for me, like I was just like, well, I shouldn't spend other people's money on this until I'm sure we're at a place where we could win. And which it dovetailed great with like Bernie running, because I knew that was a good use of everything. Like people that are low dollar donors were putting their money into something that was really important. That the megaphone that he had, the campaign that we would run. So I knew that even though I didn't need to work on the policy, I didn't need to write the white paper on canceling student loan debt. I needed to make sure we won New Hampshire, because that's how we would get what we needed to do to be able to keep going. And that would be the long game of getting us free college and canceling student loan debt.
Well, and it's you bring up, we love the Bernie campaign so much. Like I think a lot of people were Bernie supporters, and then there are people who I love it. I love it. But it's, as you're talking, I'm just thinking about everything the Bernie campaign did for progressive politics. And, so many people, I think, misunderstand presidential runs sometimes as just being about winning. But the reality is that the first and the second time, Bernie and all of the wonderful people who worked for him, absolutely including you, succeeded in getting so many progressive ideas that are mainstream into the mainstream. And what was it like to be a part of that?
It was amazing. I remember like in 16, I was like, organizing in New Hampshire as the digital director up there. And it was great seeing Facebook ads about closing private prisons doing well. Mm-hmm. It was amazing. Like my birthday is also the Roe v. Wade Day, so January 22nd. And Bernie, I was doing the math, and I'm like, here's when the Iowa caucus is. Here's New Hampshire. I bet he's going to be in New Hampshire on my birthday, and then he's going to go to Iowa for a week. And I was like really excited when I saw it worked out. So I think he did like 6 rallies in one day, and I went to most of them covering it. And it was really powerful because here we were, like started the day in North Conway, and he talked about it being like the day about Roe versus Wade and about abortion rights. And I'm like, here we are in a small New Hampshire town that's pretty conservative talking about abortion rights. And here we are talking about racial justice. So everywhere he went with this like captive audience of like thousands of people in New Hampshire, they all got the same message and they're all cheering for it. And I worked a rally in West Virginia, in West Charleston. It's this tiny town just outside of the boundary, outside of the border of Charleston. And we had an afternoon rally. This was maybe 2 or 3 days after the Indiana primary. So it was the right before the West Virginia primary. And here he is in this very conservative state, but talking about all the same issues because he never edited. He never was like, well, if I'm in West Virginia, I shouldn't talk about X, Y, or Z. Because it was, as you know, it's always the same speech with maybe one or two words different. And so this very conservative area got a very progressive message on immigration, on all of these issues. And I think it's really powerful to be able to have that. And that's like, all these people in person heard this, they saw that, then they went home and they would share that with their families and their friends and their network. And it's this exponential reach of work. And that has really helped lay the groundwork for a lot of organizing that's happening. I mean, and I think that it's really powerful. I'm excited to see what comes next and all the organizing that keeps happening. And now we have a Miss Chairman of the Budget Committee.
Oh, heck yes. It's, it's so funny you say that because you're like bringing me back to, Iowa, New Hampshire, Virginia, all these. We have a law perpetuated by the ruling class that, in these areas are conservative. Like they're Christian, but like, are they though? I mean, Christian, definitely, but a lot of Christians are correctly very progressive, and a lot of working class people just haven't been spoken to about the things that actually benefit them.
Well, you guys do the hard work. I think a lot of times, like, you've seen and I'm very excited that Jamie Harrison's going to bring back and really expand the 50 state strategy program. I'm a huge Jamie fan. I think he's great. But a lot of times people will be like, people in power or like consultants and campaigns want the easiest path to victory.
Yes.
And so it means that we don't have to organize in this state or that state in this place. And what happens is then the people in those areas are only hearing like the ridiculous Rush Limbaugh talk radio, or they're only getting served up content on Facebook that is promoting QAnon or all these horrible things. But if we can get in there and we can organize them, and I think if you look at, for example, in Alabama, you have the great work that, why am I blanking on his name? Randall Woodfin is doing, the new mayor. I guess he's up for re-election, so he's not so much new anymore, but you have the mayor of Birmingham, Randall Woodfin. You have the mayor in Jackson, Mississippi. So you have these areas where you're having great progressives running and building power in the South. I mean, Georgia, I think a lot of like the work that Stacey Abrams did out of the spotlight for years. And then it got it to the point that when it hit the right point, they were able to, I mean, she didn't win her governor's race, but she just kept organizing. I think that there's a really good lesson in that even when you lose, you just keep organizing. And now we have, I mean, Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock in the Senate. You have Senator John Ossoff. I mean, that just blows my mind. I mean, Nikema Williams, who's this amazing progressive, who now has the seat that was held by John Lewis. So you look at what's happening in Georgia, and I think Florida and Texas and these states that just are going to be able to get there if we do the work and if we really reach out to everybody.
Well, and it's funny that, as you're talking, I think there's this addiction to making it more complicated than it is, because I think it allows people to be lazy. Like, oh, these types of people will never go for policies that benefit them in every way. What? It's like you're saying, Melissa, when people, especially all the incredible organizers of color and Black organizers and Black women, all this work they've been doing, it works. Yeah. It's not rocket science, but it is difficult. And that's why a lot of people don't do it.
Nope. And it's really hard. I think like one thing that was really exciting during the primary is that, even in states that we lost, so like Mississippi and Alabama, Medicare for all still polled in huge positive numbers. So people support us on the issues and that we can work with that. Like I remember when I did a video for Now This in December of 18, I was like, oh, I don't care that canceling student loan debt only has a 40% support rate. I'm like, that means I'm starting at 40% popularity, which means I only have to move 20%. It's like the old school, like like here's like bar graph, like it's already filled, it's already colored in 40% of the way, so I only need to improve by 20% to have like, or 25%. Like that's great. I only have to do like that. This is awesome. I'll start with a base of 40%. And I think a lot of times we forget that because we're only looking at like, is something over the 50% threshold of support, as opposed to looking at like, I only need to move something 13%. I only need to like, it actually, this is great. Like how much little work I have to do in order to get it to be popular.
Well, and I think you bring up an interesting insight too, that organizing based around despair doesn't work. And I don't know why people do it. Like, oh, that'll never work. That's too progressive. The odds are stacked against us. Like, first of all, that has never mobilized anyone in the history of the universe. And it's also not true. I mean, slavery didn't disappear on its own. Labor protections didn't appear on their own. Like, every single fight we're fighting feels insurmountable, but they always do.
Yeah. Did you ever watch the Care Bears when you were little, or were you too young for the Care Bears?
I don't know. I might have. My parents didn't really let me watch TV.
Care Bears was this great cartoon in the like mid 80s, and then they kept coming back. It's these little bears, and they live in the clouds, and then they sometimes come to Earth, and they all have on their bellies like their special power, like Shamrock, and they can like, they stare into their bellies and like they can have a balloon pop up. But when they're fighting evil, they all come together and they do this Care Bear stare. And they basically just, you can see, I'll send you a clip of it. And their bellies are just like come alive with light that is just shined into everybody. And they just basically, it's like a direct action where they're just like putting light and love into everybody. And they just do the Care Bear stare and then they win. And so
I love that.
That is like, I think that's one of the things that has influenced my organizing is watching the Care Bears fight evil. And then they just like light the evil out of them.
I think that's awesome. Can we use that? Can that be like a party platform at some point?
Yeah, it's the Care Bears. I'll send you the clip. You should definitely, in your pandemic binge watching, like watch one of the Care Bear movie one, and then the Care Bear cousins come in too, and they have a cry. They're great. So 80s, everything. I don't believe this, the content that was for kids in the 80s. It's amazing.
Yeah, I missed out on that, but it sounds amazing, and I'm definitely gonna watch. Yeah, I think, I mean, look, everything you're doing, everything we're doing, everything everyone's doing, it's not about winning this time around always, though that's definitely nice. I think sometimes the way we talk about political fights is disingenuous. Like, oh, we lost out on this piece of legislation or this election. Like, no, you build up political capital, you build up social capital, and eventually, you're right. I mean, the moral arc of the universe tends towards justice, and it's definitely on our side with this one.
And we have good people. It's been great, like looking at the hires in the White House. So we're no longer just like on the gate screaming out. Like I can just text people and be like, "Oh, hey, just
Yes,
student loan debt." So I mean that part of it, which goes a lot to like the kind of team the White House is assembling. And this isn't to say that I'm not impatient. I mean, I'm very impatient. I want this done now. But I also, we finally have people in power that I trust, and that we can, through good faith, we can get it done. It doesn't mean that we might not have to do a sit-in or something creative. Like we keep all the, you don't ever like throw a tactic off the table.
right.
But hopefully we don't have to go into our toolbox. We can just get it done.
That would be nice. So we're almost at time, but Melissa, where can people find you? How can people get involved? All of that.
I sometimes tweet, aka I always tweet. So you should find me on Twitter at MCBYRNE. Again, it's MCBYRNE. And you should look at some of the orgs that currently exist. So Strike Debt, Debt Collective, Student Debt Crisis, Americans Financial Reform. They're all doing great work. Keep peeled on some things that I might be doing in the future, and make sure you're supporting the electeds that are doing the work. And you should go to whitehouse.gov and send a letter to the president telling him he needs to cancel all student loan debt.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for being with us today.
I feel like we got to hang out. I really miss you.
I miss you too. This was a lovely time. I miss Alex as well, but this was great.
Yeah, no, I'll text Alex and give him a hard time for not being here. But I know that with the two kids, he is just like, he has a lot going on. But Jocelyn, I'll message you the next time I'm in DC, and we can sit outside 15 feet apart and wave at each other and talk
I
loudly.
would love that so much. Thank you for being here, Melissa.
Awesome. Thank you.
And thank you to all of our viewers, as always. This has been a really informative show. As always, I learned a lot, but yeah, I mean, get involved with this fight with Melissa. And there's so many exciting, for the first time in 4 years, I'm excited to see what's coming out of Pennsylvania Avenue. And so hopefully that will just continue. Thank you so much. We'll see you guys next Friday.